Aloha, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Dr. Mestisa. Gosh, you can call me Dr. G. That's what all the kids call me. I am the Program Director for Mental Health America of Hawaii. And today, I really want this presentation to be interactive. It is a bit shorter than some of our other presentations because we wanted to keep things very succinct. So it should be about 45 minutes in duration. I do have two amazing team members joining us today who will be helping me on the chat. And that is Brian Telesayan and Danielle Bergen. So please feel free to drop any comments and questions as they come up into the chat so we can answer them. You will be getting a PDF of the slides in your email after the presentation, but you can also find it if you want to follow along in the chat because there were some files dropped very early on. I'll be talking about some different sheets and worksheets that are available, which are also in the chat, but we'll be attaching those to the email as well if you want to just wait until afterwards to look at those. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our presentation. And what we're going to be talking about today is Keiki self-care. So some of the things that we're going to be discussing is basically how children experience stress and sadness, that their experience of emotions can be a bit different than adults. We're also going to be talking about how they express those feelings and how it does tend to be a little bit more physiological in nature. We're going to be going about the different things that are part of an emotional toolbox and what you can help add to your Keiki's toolbox and different mindfulness skills. And typically this is when people say mindfulness for children. And I say, absolutely. I'm going to show you how you can adapt common skills that you actually might be using yourself to work with different age groups. And then we're going to talk about some really awesome community resources that are available. So before we get started, we're going to talk just a little bit about how things have changed drastically. We know that we have been looking at children going to school from home, having less peer-to-peer interaction, and just overall how COVID-19 has impacted them. When we started looking at some of the research, what we found was that in 2020, from March to October, there was about a 24% increase in children about 5 to 11 years of age that were seeking treatment in the ERs. And then for children who were 12 to 17, it was about 31%, and that's compared to 2019. So we know that they are accessing ERs at a higher rate, but we're also seeing higher acuity in terms of anxiety and depression and other mood-related issues. So let's talk a little bit about how they experience emotions. Well, first of all, the expression of it. We often see them use their facial expressions and their body's behavior and play to act out how they're feeling. So if you ask a child sometimes how they're feeling, they might say, I feel fine. And then you watch them in their play, and it's a very different thing. And it's not to say that their play is always similar to how they're feeling, but it is to say it's a really good measure to figure out if they're feeling frustrated because they are a little less restrictive in how they express themselves. I guess is a good way to say it. They're more likely to show it in their bodies. They are learning to help cope with feelings. And that when they do that, when they have really great skills, we know it helps them do better in school. They have better self-esteem and they just have less behavioral issues overall. It's really important for us to not only teach our Keiki these skills, but to also be role models in these skills. So if we want them to be really emotionally intelligent, to use some of these more advanced skills, we have to also model it as caregivers for them so they can see what it looks like as well as practice it themselves. So when we're talking about them having maybe some challenges with how they're feeling, we know that irritability in general, and this is true for our really younger Keikis, but also a lot for our adolescents, that irritability and anger can actually be a mask for them feeling sad or confused. It is more likely to happen with younger age children than with adults. And so sometimes when they're having a difficult time, maybe they're like, pushing the boundaries, talking back, you can just check in and say, like, how are you feeling? Are you feeling sad? And sometimes they'll say, I'm angry, and that's okay. We just know that we just need to keep checking in because it's coming from somewhere. And typically that has to do with unmet needs. Sometimes they're going to express those feelings, whether they're frustration or anxiety, they're going to express them in body sensations. And so when you have a small child say that their stomach hurts, it's a really good sign that they're possibly feeling overwhelmed or anxious. I could go into a long spiel about how that is connected to the nervous system, but just to know it is a body reaction for adults and children to have stomach issues when they're feeling anxious. Their gastrointestinal issues do increase. They also have just a really limited vocabulary to talk about how they're feeling. So if they're feeling disappointed, if they're feeling resentful, like those aren't words that typically the younger children would have and have an experience expressing it. So we have to really model what that would sound like. And we're not going to choose those words because maybe they are too complex for their age range, but we're going to try to find words that are similar. And I'm going to talk about that in just a little bit. And of course, yes, they're going to act out those feelings and their behavior and play. You might see some isolation, withdrawing, or even, just a little bit more of acting out behaviors between their peers and themselves. First thing that we have to do when we talk about emotions in our Keiki is just to go back to the basics. And I probably say this in all my self-care presentations. It's really important to start with the basics. So you're going to look at those things like sleep, diet, exercise, and just see how they're doing there. Because if you can address it there, it might be enough. That's just the thing that they are tackling with. And because they do tend to be so body rooted, missing a nap, missing a meal could really disrupt how they're feeling and their behavior. So you're going to start with questions like, how did they sleep? Did they take their nap? Are they tired? For our little ones, sometimes they start to transition out of taking their naps, and their nap schedules change drastically within 6 months. And those are all things to keep in mind because that can be really hard for them. Asking like, are they sick? Does their stomach hurt? Because again, we're looking for those flags to do with their stomachs to tell us if they're feeling anxious and overwhelmed. Are they having low energy? Could this possibly be something else? Allergies, the seasonal cold. We're looking for all those things. Have they eaten? We always have that term, that word, hangry, right? Are they angry because they're hungry? These are all basic things we can do just to help modulate their emotions. Give them a snack, make sure they've had that water. And we do have what we call the check-in book. It's a really cool worksheet, and it is available on our website, which we'll talk about at the end, how to access all these really great resources. But it just kind of helps the kids see, like, yes, take a break if you feel sleepy or you're feeling like run down. If you have extra energy, run it off so that you can settle in and do what you need to do. I like using a Likert scale. So just to be a little transparent, I used to work with inpatient psychiatric care for kids as young as 3 all the way up to 18. And what I wanted them to be able to do was to tell me how they felt. And I wanted it to be easy because I think that sometimes we have a more complex vocabulary and processing measure than a 4-year-old, right? And I wanted them to be able to give me really easy ways to talk about how they're feeling. So if you're working with a child, and I would say this is really good for like 8 on, you can use a 5-point measure. And here's how it works. You can see you have these really great pictures where it shows the emotions of it. And they don't have to really look at the words for it, but you're going to say, on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel? You could even just post this picture up and have them point to which one they're at, if your child tends to be a little bit more nonverbal. But when you talk about that lower scale, let's say you make 5 the upset point. If they say, I feel like I'm at a 5, I'm upset, I point to the upset face. But here's a good time when you can say, tell me a story when you last felt like that. You're getting an anchor for what upsets them, but also later on, if they're like, I don't know where I'm at, you can say, is it like that time you were, fill in the example, or is it more like that time you were, fill in the example? And you have their anchor points and they can figure out, well, I guess in between or more like this one. And that will help them kind of choose their number more accurately. So they're going to give you examples of it, share those personal stories, and then you're going to help them as you move through, find things that will make them feel better. Neutral is not a bad place to be. The vast majority of my day is not me spent very blissful. Right? I'm pretty happy in general, but I don't spend my entire day trying to maintain a high level of bliss because that's exhausting and it's not really what we expect to see. So neutral's okay. Like if they tell you, well, I guess I'm kind of at a 3, I'm not upset, but I'm not like really, really happy. Like that's fine. How do you maintain it? If you want to feel a little bit better, what are you going to do that makes you feel better? Most of the time when I ask for an example from the neutral, they actually make this face and they're just like, meh. And I said, be careful. It doesn't mean that you're bored. It just means you're okay. You're good. And then, of course, that high level, which is a smiley face, they feel good, things are going well. And you can have them just give you some really great examples of what that looks like and what some of their experiences have been. But here's also a good time just to say, like, what can you do when you are upset to go from that 5 to that 1, or vice versa, however you choose to use your Likert scale. How do you move the dial? How do you make yourself feel a little bit better? And if they don't know, that's okay, because I'm going to teach you a couple ways that they can start to change that. Some of you are going to be caregiving for Keiki who are much younger than a 5-point scale. They're not going to do well with a 5-point scale, and that's okay. We don't expect children kind of under the age of 8. Some will be fine using it. A lot of them will. It's just too many points. And that's when we say, let's recommend a 3-point scale. This is basically going to be the stoplight method. And they're very familiar with that. They love that game, the stoplight game. So when you're at the stoplight, what do you do when it's red? You stop. You stop because you don't feel okay. What do you need? You can see how simple it is to use this 3-point scale. So yes, red's a stop, you're upset. Let's look at that toolbox and see what we can do to make you feel better. Yellow is just slow down. Something's a little bit off. I don't feel great, but I don't feel terrible. I'm just not sure how I feel. So do that check-in, use that check-in bug worksheet, and just see what you might need if you do need your emotional toolbox. It could be a snack, it could be a nap. And then of course, green is go. You're feeling great. No need for anything but basic self-care. I've been asked before for these kind of Likert scales to make it really simple. So if you do check in your chat, you're going to see there's a 3-point Likert scale based on this stoplight method. And there's also a 5-point one where you can drop in examples and just fill that out. And then you can print it and have that posted somewhere they can see so that they're reminded of what that looks like and you can use it very easily. I always recommend the refrigerator. We use it all the time, right? And so you can see it and it's very available. So why do we teach emotions to our kids? Like, this seems like a really advanced skill maybe, but what we know is when they're more emotionally intelligent, when they have more language and experience around it, it normalizes how they feel. Like, it's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel anxious. That's normal. And it helps them just have decreased anxiety about how they feel. When we teach them how to self-soothe, it decreases their overall acting out behaviors. And if we keep teaching them how to self-soothe, as they become adults, they will have that internalized knowledge to use far into adulthood. And we all use that still today. When they learn about self-care, it actually builds extremely strong mental health skills, which is what we all want. And then skills that are built now are skills that can last forever. So if I teach, and we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, if I teach a 4-year-old how to do diaphragmatic breathing through bubble breaths, by the time they are a 14-year-old, they will have changed and modified that to regular deep breathing. And when they're 44, they'll still be able to use the same skill. So these are toolboxes that last a lifetime. That's really the goal. So let's talk about emotion names, because I do think we sometimes oversimplify things to make it age appropriate. We talk about being mad, sad, happy. Those are very common emotions that we teach our little ones. But I would like to challenge you today to teach them some emotions that are a little bit outside of that, but also age appropriate. Emotions like being brave. They watch so many great shows, they read so many fantastic books, and that's a really good opportunity to say, well, they were very scared, but they still went out and did it. What does that make them? And of course, they would say brave. They're brave because they still did it. Yes, I wonder what helped them get through it. And then you can start talking about those skills again. You can see you're just kind of building opportunities to talk about and use examples. That they can feel cheerful. It doesn't have to just be happy. Bored. They're going to learn that word pretty quickly, actually. It's good to teach them that because it's the difference between neutral and bored, and we want them to know the difference. Bored can have a little bit more of a low energy, like dragging feeling, but we also want to empower them to know there's things you can do so you feel less bored, that you can self-motivate and do some fun activities and amuse yourself. Feeling confused. A lot of great opportunity for teaching that, and surprised, curious, you want to know what's in the box. And so that's a really great fun game, like what's in the box. And they're like, I just want to know. And you're like, oh yeah, because you're curious. You can see how easy it is to start to teach some of these different emotions. When they do something and they're really proud of it, you can say, wow, you feel really good about yourself because you did this thing or you made this thing. And that's when we go, that means that you're proud and I'm proud of you. Starting to teach again those emotion names. Of course, frustrated, give them a package that's really hard to open. That's the easiest way to teach them that one. And when they get upset, they'll like, start moving that package. I taught this to a child who was 2 and she couldn't pronounce it, but she would say, I feel frustrated. And I said, yes, you do. And let me help you. When we feel frustrated, we ask for help. And then of course, silly. That's a great one to teach them because sometimes they do feel silly and really energized. And that can sometimes be a challenging combination for us. I think that when we make things fun, when we turn them into a game, it's when it's the best opportunity for learning. So I really like this game called Mirror, Mirror, What Do I See? This is rooted in a lot of different science, and we can talk about the neurology, the mirror neurons, but here's what it really comes down to make it simple. There's a part of your brain that mirrors the response of other people. And so we can use that to help our kids learn about emotions. So I just say, I'm a mirror and I'm going to show you an emotion and you tell me what it is. And then once they tell you what it is, now you show me what that looks like. And they're going to start to pick up those really subtle facial discrepancies, those really subtle like facial expressions that could be unique to your family, your culture, or just the region that you live in. But it's really important for them to be able to see that, but also say, like, could it look different? So if I show you angry, does angry look different, right? Could it be? So then we start to make that subtlety, that like expansion of their schema of what angry looks like. So again, just becoming more and more emotionally intelligent with a very simple game of mirror, mirror. I've been talking about this toolbox, and if you've been to any of our other presentations, you're going to have heard this phrase pretty frequently. I like it because it talks about the function of something, that you have this self-care metaphorical toolbox that you can go into and figure out what you need from it. It's just a collection of coping skills, tools, and understanding of daily self-care that helps them feel better. For really little ones, you can make an actual box, right? And that box would contain, depending upon what they like, a soft blanket, their favorite plushies, their favorite books, music. It can have their favorite movies, whatever they like to do. It can have calming jars in it, those like those like little squeezy things we use, mostly in the office, but you can put all those things into an actual box. And so when they're feeling upset, you can just ask them, what do you need? Let's go look in the box. I think that's really helpful for the smaller ones. But as they start to develop and become more mature, you can scale back on that toolbox and have it be more of behavioral and like internalized tools. We know that when people have different emotions, especially our kids, that we're not going to intervene the same way. So it's not going to work every single time to do the same thing. And we want to keep that in mind. So for our little ones, when they're feeling angry, a lot of them have excess energy. They're bouncing off the wall. They're like getting really loud and starting to act out. If that is their experience when they're feeling angry, help them burn off the energy first. Having them, and for some of you who have little ones like this, if I were to say, sit them down, do some deep breathing, you'd say they're never sitting. And I'd say that's probably true. If your child tends to have a little bit more energy, burning off that excess energy first before we start using some of those other calming tools will be really important. Also helping to figure out what made you upset. It could be very long, circuitous story, but that's okay. It's really important for them to figure out what made you upset, because if they have an acting out behavior, we can go back there and say, this made you upset. This is what you did. What could you have done differently? What did you need? What could you have done differently? And you can see as they get older, we're just going to keep building in those opportunities for learning better, healthier interventions. And they can use the dive response. And I'm going to talk to you about what that looks like in just a few minutes. For some of our more anxious little ones, they sometimes kind of get frozen. They get that wide-eyed kind of deer in headlights experience. You're trying to talk to them and That just means they're really overwhelmed. And because they are so rooted in their bodies, if their bodies become overwhelmed, if their nervous system becomes triggered, it's very hard for them to listen, to like follow any kind of instructions, and to follow some of these things I'm going to teach you. So really the first step we're going to do is we're going to make them ground back into those bodies. And you can do that doing very simple techniques. I think a 3-2-1 is very helpful. Tell me 3 things you see, 2 things you hear, 1 thing you smell, because it forces them to kind of reorient into their bodies. And that's when you can start helping them practice mindfulness and then self-soothing after the fact. When they're feeling stressed, start with your check-in bug. Have you eaten? Have you napped? Are you sick? Just getting those basics kind of eliminated to figure out what it could possibly be. Help them soothe. And if they're in school and they have some bigger projects due, teach them the chunking method, which is just big projects can be broken down in much smaller pieces. And your focus goes, as in all mindfulness, just on the one in front of you. That's it. And when that's done, you move to the next one. That is a very advanced skills for our younger ones, but really critical as they move through and start, getting more and larger projects, academically speaking, to figure out how to chunk and prioritize. So we really want to model that for them. I mentioned the dive response earlier. It works for anything if they're upset. Here's what the dive response is. When you go diving, when you go swimming, you have a gland right here in your nose that when it gets cold and when it gets wet, it slows the entire nervous system down. It says, all the oxygen I have in my body is what's in here now because I'm holding my breath because I'm swimming. I don't want to burn through it really fast, so let me slow down blood pressure and heart rate so I can conserve intrinsic oxygen. It's a really long explanation, right? But here's what it means. If you go swimming, you feel really at peace because your body slows itself down to keep as much oxygen in it as possible. How can you use that to benefit you with your little ones? Well, you can take them swimming, right? Because that immediately activates it. But right now you're saying, Dr. G, we can't go swimming every time they're upset. That actually probably would work in their favor. True. But you can have them put a cold, damp, wet rag across this part of their face that will also activate the dive response and then start to calm their system. Have them do some slow, deep breathing, cold, wet rag, and you're going to activate that dive response. And then once they kind of settle, start to have those conversations and use that Likert scale. But use the dive response first. Why do we teach mindfulness? Any of our trainings that you go to that's about self-care and coping skills, we're going to be talking about mindfulness. And I think sometimes people go, but why? Like, I get it, like it's helpful, but there's so much research that talks about why it's helpful. And one of those big things is that it calms the nervous system, which is the first major body system that gets activated during high levels of stress. And it's been high levels of stress for all of us. So mindfulness can help children and adults of all ages. It helps reduce stress, anxiety, regulates your mood, improves attention and focus, which, let's just be honest, it's been really hard to attend and to concentrate on things. I can't even begin to imagine for those kids who are at home having to make those really big adjustments, seeing that other people are stressed and not fully understanding what's happening, how hard it would be to attend. And then we know that it also improves just basic overall mental health. So we get a lot of great returns for learning those mindfulness skills. So what are some mindfulness activities that you can do? The first one we're going to talk about is mindful eating. Mindful eating works, and there's a really cool kind of exercise that you can do. It works because you have to stay just in the moment. We sometimes notice that if our little ones are watching TV or doing an activity, they're just kind of shoveling food in as fast as possible. But when we do this exercise called the orange exercise, it was introduced by Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Buddhist monk. He actually said, use the imagination. Use the imagination to give an opportunity to give thanks and gratitude for something really small. So what you would do is have them close their eyes, give them a raisin, give them an orange. So for this exercise, we're just going to use the orange as the item. So you have them kind of center and say, close your eyes, I want you to hold your orange. I want you to feel it, smell it, but we're not going to eat it yet. Now imagine your orange is a tiny seed that's in the ground. Who's going to water the seed? The farmer. What does the farmer look like? Now our orange is growing into a big orange tree. Does anything live in the tree? Are there squirrels or birds? They're just going to keep talking to you about like what it's like. It's sensory grounding. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? Now the orange is here and it's beautiful and round and ready to be picked. So here comes our farmer. What's the farmer driving? The farmer is going to come and put our orange into a crate in the truck and drive it. Where does he drive it to? Where did we buy the orange? So once they go through the process of how it grew up, how it got to where you bought it, and now they're holding it, then you go back through. I want you to smell it, feel it. Now take one bite. And when you take that one bite, I want you to imagine from a seed all the way to this moment, how many things had to happen to give you this orange. And for that, we have gratitude. Very simple exercise, just to have gratefulness for our food, but to stay in the moment in the experience of eating the food. You can do different breathing exercises, which we'll go over in just a minute, and rainbow walks, which we'll also talk about. I do recommend the mindful eating. It's really fun to do with raisins, especially if you have a couple of small ones who you're doing this with, because they all hold it and imagine the process, and they really like doing it together. And when I've done this with adults, they always seem to say, this raisin's really sweet because you're mindfully experiencing it. So highly recommend that activity. Let's talk about books. MHAH, we love books. We have our own book club if you're interested. The reason I like books is because they're an easy way to add it into your schedule. You don't have to find that moment, buy that raisin, be like, I've got 20 minutes to walk them through a growing process for mindful eating. You just get the book and then you add it to their nightly reading and it's done. And there's some really great mindfulness books. Peaceful Picky Meditation, A Handful of Quiet by Thich Nhat Hanh. That's where you get different stones and imagine you're doing different things. I'm a mountain, I'm a rock, I sit like a frog. They just do all the introductory things for mindfulness. And Puppy Mind, I think, is a brilliant book because it introduces the concept of your mind can be like a puppy. It gets distracted and it wonders. If someone walks through a door, your puppy mind goes, ooh, what's outside that door? And it teaches them that you can train your mind like you train a puppy to do what you need it to do. So that's a really great introductory into what adults kind of consider the monkey mind method. But this is the puppy mind because it's more appropriate. We also have bookmarks available in Busy Bees where you will find book recommendations on these things as well. Other books that you can have that you can add into your just regular reading schedule are books that are about specific things. So anxiety, what do you do with a chance? If you're feeling anxious and you miss your chance, what can you do to prepare yourself until that chance comes back around again? The Rabbit Listened, I just think this is such a fantastic book. It's in my personal library myself. It's about a child who creates this beautiful block structure and it falls down and they're very upset. And all the animals come and they're like, let's laugh about it. Let's talk about it. Let's rebuild. And none of those things make the child feel better. And then the rabbit comes and just sits and listens to the child talk about what had happened, all these recommendations they didn't want to do. And then when they were done talking, the child realizes, I feel better. Sometimes all you need is someone to listen to you and then decides to rebuild. So it's a great way to introduce a very light but age-appropriate concept of grief, how you get through the disappointment and loss of something. And then, of course, sleep. This is a beautiful illustrated board book, little puffy board book, so it's a little bit more appropriate for ages like 2 to 5. But it just talks, it's one of those kind of like builds upon it, like Is a Room on the Broom, of people sleeping and different animals sleeping. Just a really cute book to add into there about the importance of sleep. You heard me talk a little bit about grounding before, the 3-2-1 method, but you can also do this with kids that are a little bit older, the ones that are really into coloring. We have this worksheet that's available on our website, and I will give you that information about the website and where to go to get these. This is a really great one because you don't have to come up with it. Some of you may have been listening to the orange exercise and thinking, I'm not going to remember all of those pieces. And that's okay, because for this grounding exercise, you just read the back of the coloring sheet. You don't have to come up with anything. And what I want you to do is just kind of ground into where you're sitting right now, get comfortable. And I'm going to read through this with you so that you can hear kind of what that script sounds like. So feel free to open your eyes, keep them that way, or close them, whichever makes you more comfortable. But we're going to go ahead and do this really brief grounding exercise. The tree has roots that flow deep into the earth. Some forests are so old that the tree roots weave together to hold them all in place. When you feel stressed or upset, you can be like a tree and remember to connect to the ground. You ground by taking in a big breath through your nose and slowly letting it out through your mouth. Then you can say, I'm as tall as a tree. My feet are like roots on the ground. My back is straight like the trunk of a tree. My arms are like branches that I can stretch to the sky. When I wiggle my fingers, they are like leaves in the wind. My head is the canopy of the tree. I can see all around me. I can be like a tree. Taking another deep breath, then come back in with me. Just by using your voice to kind of set that really calming tone, the kids can color the front of that sheet. You have piggy options and kitty options. You see the top of that slide, and then you can read the back of them so they can act it out and be that tree. But you can see that why that'd be really helpful, because you're getting the mindfulness and coloring, but also doing an active grounding meditation. Let's talk about breaths. One of the most underrated, most effective interventions, period. Bubble breathing. So when I say deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, we think, how am I teaching that to a 2-year-old? And I would say, get bubbles and have them blow the biggest bubble that they can. To get a big bubble, they'll quickly realize you have to breathe really deep inhale and a really slow exhale. And there you have it. Diaphragmatic breathing. Tricks of the trade, right? An alternative to this, which is teaching them a little bit about the pacing of breathing, is pinwheel breathing. You get a pinwheel and you just have them do slow, long breaths. Make your pinwheel turn as slow as possible. And when they're doing that, you say, now, how do you feel? Typically, they'll say, calm, bored, relaxed, like something to that nature. And then you say, take short breaths, fast breaths, make the pinwheel go really fast. How do you feel? And then they'll be like active, like happy, like they'll be way more energized. And so you can start to teach them by just changing how you breathe, the pace of your breathing. You can change how your body feels. And that's starting to get a little bit more advanced. And then this is a really great introduction one to more about location. You can get a plushie, a teddy bear, and place that right on the child's diaphragm. Have them take in those deep breaths and see if they can move that plushie up and down with their diaphragm as they take those breaths. So making sure they're getting big inhales, big exhales, and using that diaphragm instead of their chest. Great one for teaching appropriate location of pulling the breath from. And it's very easy for young kids to do this one. Other things that you can do, of course, we always say connect with nature, but a fun one to do when you're walking is the rainbow walk. Just go for a walk and find objects that are Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and they go in violet. Rainbow walk, what do I see? And then when you kind of play that game, you could bounce it back and forth. You do red, I'll do orange. And the whole time they're connecting with nature, staying fully present, and getting all those really great benefits of exercise. Calming jars. We have these in our office. This is actually a photo of calming jars that we made one year. And we had them in 2 different sizes and all the colors of the rainbow. We have the instructions that are available on our website. If you have little ones, don't use the ball jars, use an empty plastic container. That's the #1 complaint I would get is this is gonna go sailing and it's glass. And I'd say, that's true, use plastic. You just need a couple of things. You need some glitter glue or some clear glue. You'll see it in for crafting at the store. And you're gonna need some hot water-ish to dissolve the glue, some food coloring. You need very, very little. It does stain easily, so do some supervision when they're doing it. And the more glue you add, the slower the glitter falls, and you can really control for how quick it does. And then you top off the jar. You can even glue the lid and seal it down. These are really fun. I think the secret to these are the different colors, food colorings, the different shapes you can get in glitter, but also absolutely splurge a little bit on that iridescent glitter because that's what makes it look like fairy dust. That's what they really love. I used to keep this in my office when I would do therapy for adults, and I did work some with little ones then, and adults used it way more, way more than the kids did. Really great weekend activity to do with anyone, really. We talked about the importance of kids learning these skills, but it's also, like we said before, about modeling these skills. So being a mindful parent, being a mindful caregiver, first of all, is just to say, you know, you're doing your best, and your best is going to look different from the day to day. And with everything that's going on, have some grace for yourself, be patient with yourself, and know, yeah, it's not always Pinterest perfect. It's sometimes I brushed their hair, they got their food. Okay, now what, right? And that's okay, day to day. Day to day. Be curious about your kids and the Keiki that might be in your life, what they're doing, how they're learning things, what they're into. Even just being able to have really strong connection by being curious about what they're curious about really helps them feel connected. And then they watch. They watch to see how you react, what you do, what you're into, because they care about you. And that's when we want to make sure that we're role modeling what they want, what we want to see from them. Communicate clearly and simply. This is probably a pretty big one. Make sure you're making good eye contact. They're not distracted. You're not distracted with your phone, and that it's as simple as possible. We had a rule of thumb when I was going through graduate school, which was if something's important, make sure you have the eye contact, make sure you say it as simply as possible, and make sure that you've repeated it. Because we don't retain 60% of what we learn because there's so much to learn every day. Keeping that in mind, if it's really important, repeat it. Model gratitude, even for the really small things. We talked about that, mindful eating. That's a great place to practice gratitude. Rainbow walk, gratitude for nature and all that it gives us. But it's a really good time for us because the harder it is to find kind of hope and positivity, the more important it is to have gratitude for the really important small things. Show support. If they're having a hard time, you just want to be there for them, but also say, like, who else can we talk to when we feel sad? Let them become aware of the fact that there's a circle of people who care about them that they can reach out to. And then #1, have fun. If it's fun for them and it's fun for you, this will be something that's easy to keep up with and to do regularly. We have a lot of different resources. If you haven't already checked out our Facebook page, please feel free. Go under the events for any future trainings. And we do have more trainings for youth and kids and adults. You can also check out our different groups. We have one specific to Maui, but we also have Busy Bees. It's got some really cool activities, gardening ideas. It does have book recommendations. Sometimes people share their really cool pets with us, and that's always fun. And then we have our book club. You'll get different recommendations for adults, classics. I think we did like staff favorites. We have a thriller one coming up, and we even have like bingo cards for different themes. So if you're trying to get your child more interested, or the Keiki in your life more interested in reading, there's always like themed bingo cards that can be used from there. You saw a lot of different sheets that we were talking about. They're going to be on this website when you go to mentalhealthhawaii.org. Go there, just click on that Get Connected banner, and you're going to see the printable information. You'll find those coloring sheets, that grounding sheet, bookmarks, all the things we're talking about are going to be there. There are going to be a couple of new things that are coming up in there next week, but you already have early access to them because they're in your chat and will be connected to you on your email. So that's going to be a printout of the diaphragmatic breathing exercise, teddy bears, pinwheel, and bubble breathing. There's a bingo self-care card for kids that's also attached. You have the 5-point Likert scale and the 3-point stoplight emotion Likert scale in sheets, easy to print and just use directly, so you don't have to make them yourself. Those are also in the chat. And then a summer reading list, so if you want to help them track their reading this summer and add some of those really fun books that are just going to give them even more emotional skills, you can use that to track it with. We will be also adding a resource sheet. You'll see an SEL resource sheet that was done, I believe, by the Department of Education that's listed there because there's so many questions about what's available, what's not available. You will also be getting another resource sheet that's for crisis intervention. It's going to have numbers like the Hawaii CARES number, the Poison Control Center, just anything you might possibly need for immediate intervention. We also wanted to mention there's the helpyourkeiki.com website through Child Adolescent Mental Health Division. KMD, if there's any concerns that you might be having about a child that you know or your child in needing more assistance for your family, or like in the educational setting, you can reach out to them. It'll tell you exactly which guidance center to contact. If you have any questions after this training, because that sometimes happens, feel free to email us at info@mentalhealthhawaii.org and we'll try to connect you with the answer that you are looking for. This is our numbers that we have, so we are in office. The top one is for Oahu, the bottom one is for Maui County. And of course, our website. You will be getting the PDF of this. If you haven't already downloaded it in the chat, feel free to do it now, but also we will be sending it attached to the email. So I know that was a lot of information. I'm going to check to see if we have any questions in the chat.
There are a couple, Dr. G.
Okay. Oh, the feel good box, very nice. Yes, that's awesome. I know that there are some schools that have been doing emotional and social learning, which of course is going to incorporate some of this information into it. I don't know how many schools are doing it, but I know there's some really awesome elementary schools that have fantastic programs in them. Sometimes I just go and check to see what they're doing because I'm super impressed. I haven't heard of Conscious Discipline or Trauma Smart. I will look into them. Oh, interesting. Oh, I actually developed this curriculum based on some of the work that I was doing in the inpatient psychiatric setting for the kids. It is deeply rooted in kind of like a behavioral therapy, attachment theory. It also has like a hint of dialectical behavioral therapy. When you see us talking about that dive response, that is absolutely what it's coming from, and very rooted in mindfulness for children, which I've been trained in mindfulness. So we looked across the board and we're like, if you're trying to help your child do self-care, what's the easiest way to kind of implement that in? And went across multiple different models and kind of pulled the most effective ones for little ones. But there's a lot of really great curriculum out there, and yet they could do very deep dives on just specific topics. I mean, we could talk for hours specifically about just breathing. But this is hopefully more consumable to get you interested and to help you start having those conversations. Yep, thank you. There's a link to the printables. Ah, super awesome. Awesome. So thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop them into a chat. And like I said earlier, these questions could come up later on. Feel free to email us at info@mentalhealthhawaii.org. We are taping this this session today, your chat will not show up within the taping for the Facebook Live or the YouTube, but we do know that sometimes people want to attend and their schedule it just doesn't work for them. And so we do try to keep a taping of these different types of trainings on our YouTube so that if you want to rewatch part of it or share it with someone who wasn't able to attend, that you can do that. That's also available on Facebook. Next week, we're going to be uploading onto our website in that Get Connected Printables portion, all these amazing resources that I dropped into the chat, including that diaphragmatic breathing page, the Likert scale, the bingo, the summer reading list. Those are all going to be available to you as of next week through there. Hello. Oh my gosh. Yes, I'm seeing some friends in the chat. Hi, friends. And if you're ever looking for something and you're having a hard time accessing it, just give us a call or shoot us an email and we'll make sure that you get connected to that. But we're really excited. This will be also offered next month. It is Children's Mental Health Awareness Month, and the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Division is doing so many amazing things. So we will be having another Keiki self-care presentation during that time. We're going to be having a Child and Adolescent Mental Health Division 101. And so if you're thinking that you or someone that you work with or know might be interested in learning more about the services provided there, we're going to be listing that event soon on our Facebook events page. And doing a mental health film festival with films specifically done by youth. I'm super excited about that one. That is also coming at the end of May. And so keep your eyes out for those events in our email blasts and in our Facebook events, because they're going to be posting in just the next week or so. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So thank you so much for joining us today. As in all things, when we learn more about resiliency, when we teach it, share it, know it, it makes our community so much stronger. And I think that is the biggest protective factor we can have right now. So thank you for all that you do in coming and sharing and learning with us, because it does contribute to how well we're doing right now. And though it's not always easy, it is about connection and hope. So have a fantastic weekend. I hope you can find some time to do some self-care or just take a really great walk in nature. And if you need us, call us. We're always here.